We're about to go live on Freshly Pressed in about 40 seconds, so you can just join us as we prepare. Now is the time for me to be tweeting. Ooh, I can't wait for a new
So
person.
maybe you should do. Maybe what you should do is that premium times report.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could do it as a bigger stock special.
Mm,
Because I'm trying to fit. I'm not sure I can fit all of that into 2 minutes. Because it's quite
I'll
detailed.
spend some time on it.
Hmm?
Yeah, okay. Let's spend some time, but at least. Oh, oops.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Let's go. Don't worry.
Smooth 98.1 Lagos, Nigeria World. Here we are, 30 minutes gone past 7 o'clock, and this is Freshly Pressed on Smooth Breakfast. I'm Shopper Martins, and joining me for the next half hour, I have got Mr. C in the studio with me. Good morning, Mr. C.
Good morning, Shopper. Good morning, Lagos.
Make sure you find him up on social media at Monsieur C. There are three E's after that C. He shares his analysis up on social media, not just on radio. All right, let's get you in on this conversation. We are already streaming live up on youtube.com/smooth981 FM Lagos. Go over there if you'd like to watch what happens in the studio, what happens live, and you can also join in the conversation up on the live chat. So go ahead and do that. Or if you prefer listening to your radio, that's wonderful. We love to have you. And we love to keep you company. And we love to take your messages on WhatsApp on 0809 440 981 or taking it to Twitter also. Hashtag FreshlyPress981. We're already on there. Just waiting for the messages to come in. Starting off with this one from the Daily Post, federal government assures devastating flood won't cause food scarcity in Nigeria. This is coming from the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Mohammed Abubakar, who spoke at a news conference on the impact of the flood. In which we've discussed this quite a bit on the show, where hundreds of citizens and property, crops, farmlands have been destroyed in several states. In fact, we've got another story that will take and add to this one in a bit from the Premium Times, or a report on farmers in Bauchi. But first of all, going back to the minister's words, what would you say about this? Because he said there's no food shortage at this point, by the grace of God, no food shortage in this country now, and even in 2023. I would love to believe him. So, if tell me what you think. Can we believe him?
Okay, thank you, Shopper. So the first thing is he made a statement, and there are very little or no facts to support that statement. Now, even before the devastating floods that have wreaked havoc across at least two-thirds of the states in the Federation, we're already having a huge challenge with food security. And why do I say that? The persistent conflict in the northern states, especially the northeast, and which stretch at some point to the northwest, um, saw the emergence of violent armed men taking over farms, stealing produce, and demanding and collecting tribute from farmers to access their farmlands. Added to that was the fact that in some places there wasn't sufficient rainfall in the early part of the year.
Mm,
So you already have that volatile mix. You then have some parts of the country where agricultural crops are produced, and it's difficult getting the crops from the farmlands to the towns where they will be stored or sold, as the case may be. You then add this unusual and very damaging floods that have wreaked havoc, like I earlier said. Now, when you put all of this together, it then begs the question, how is it possible that there's no food insecurity in Nigeria today? I find that hard to believe, and I'm going to explain why. We mustn't forget that because of the persistent conflict, especially in the northern states, as at October 2021, 12.9 million Nigerians had been internally displaced. meaning they had no homes, they had no sources of livelihood, and they had to eat. We are all witnesses to this, to the accounts, the complaints, and the grievances that come out from the various IDP camps that they are not being properly catered for. And then what follows is the usual government denial that it's not correct, as those stories are untrue and factually incorrect.
Mm.
Now, what is clear is, for whatever reason, the Minister for Agriculture made a statement that might not be factually correct. It hasn't gotten to alarming levels, that is for certain. However, for him to say there's no food shortage, I would like to see the facts he's relying on. I would like to see the evidence, the material he supposedly perused before making the statement or before making arriving at that opinion. Now, it's interesting that the harvest in October, which was supposed to have reduced the impact of the food shortage from the earlier part of the year for the
Mhm.
reasons aforesaid, was severely hampered by the flood.
Now, if I'm Mrs. Z, let's just bring in this next story from the Premium Times, a special report in which Bauchi farmers count losses as floods wash away farmland. So we're going over to Bauchi, which is predominantly an agrarian state and has over 80% of its population as farmers. Now, most of the farmers engaged in commercial farming, which means that their products are making it over to the rest of us in the rest of the country, with supply chains going outside of the state. And so Premium Times went around the different local government areas in Bauchi State. This is quite a very in-depth article, by the way, and I would suggest that you go and read it if you can, but we'll try and tackle it within the time that we have. So Premium Times went around the different local governments, going speaking with the farmers, seeing what had happened and how they had been affected by the floods. And I'm just going to take the words of one farmer who said, "People need to buy foodstuff and keep because we're here on the fields and we're seeing what is happening." This is what do you see is happening from this special report?
Okay, thank you, Shopper. So you see, this report gives the light to the statement by the Minister for Agriculture. Now, there are 20 local governments in Bauchi State. 17 of the 20 local governments, that is 85% of the state, was affected by the floods. The Bauchi state government conservatively puts the value of the damage suffered at 21 billion naira. Let that sink in. Now, the people on the ground, whose boots are on the ground, are saying start to stock food. And then we have a public official.
By the way, we've had farmers who came together and said that if you're counting what they've lost from their farmlands, that they're looking at 42 billion naira conservative estimate.
Fantastic. Now, added to that, I don't know if you've been tracking the price of rice recently in the markets. It's
It's skyrocketing.
Picture a shuttle, a space shuttle at one of NASA's takeoff sites, prepared to take off, and then it leaves Earth. That is literally what is happening. And it's going to get worse because the supplies are limited, the demand is unbelievable, and the people selling, the people who produce these things, will want to maximize their profit as is want in Nigeria. Whenever a product or a service is limited in supply, but the demand is very large, what we've continued to witness in Nigeria is the price will continue to rise exponentially. So, my advice to the listeners out there, if you can, begin to stock up on food because in some parts of the country, these floodwaters have still not receded. Now, losses have been suffered.
But then again, Mr. C, what are we going to see if we see panic buying taking effect then?
Well, at this point, we can't rule out panic buying because remember, Christmas is coming. People, and it's only natural whether Christmas is coming or not, you need to restock up on your food supplies. That's the way life runs. Now, the people who have suffered these losses, guess what? Some of them actually took out loans for production. The production wasn't completed, money lost. They're now expected to reproduce with what?
Now, going back to the minister's words, because he had talked about dry farming, farming for the dry season rather, and said that okay, production is not going to stop. And part of the reason why he can talk about there being no food scarcity is the emphasis on dry season farming, which the farmers also spoke about. But when they spoke about it, they said it was more as a well backup, right, or last resort, in which some of the farmers are even saying that half will go towards this onward supply chain while they'll keep the other half for themselves and their families.
So traditionally, we've had a dry season, and we could conservatively almost always predict what month of the year the dry season would come in. But with the advent of climate change, all that is taking a new definition, a new complexion. Who would have thought that we'll be experiencing heavy rainfalls in October? That was not always the case. Now, even with this hope and renewed drive or renewed push towards dry season farming, will the rains let up? Because the whole idea of dry season farming is that it's traditionally a period where there's little or no rain. So you can conveniently plant your crops and harvest them before the rainy season comes, in which there's consistent and regular rainfall. So the big question I have is, yes, it's good to switch to dry season farming. That period of time is usually shorter, and will the current climate change allow you to produce in the quantity or numbers you want to produce it? Two, the government needs to think very quickly of providing financial assistance to farmers who've been hard hit by the damage.
Mm.
And then also instances of cattle rustling, because that's also part of the agricultural food chain, has to be stopped. And it is only a concerted effort by the state government and the security agencies that will bring this to the barest minimum.
All right, we're going to go from one instance of counting losses to another because from The Guardian, airlines count losses, relocate operations as union shuts down MMA2. But before we get into that story, let me take some of your messages that are coming in across the platforms. I'll start off with MI, very first message of Freshly Pressed. MI from Akoka, who says, I hope Nigerians will be angry enough to vote out people who offend their collective intelligence and sensibilities when they speak. The worst flooding in a decade brushed aside with some words just for political gain. The biggest rice farmer lost 4,500 hectares alone. A bag of rice is inching towards 50,000 naira, says MI.
No, it's gone beyond that.
Whilst Tajuddin from Alimasho says, my take on the flooding disaster. Um, oh wow, okay. He has a very strong take on the flooding disaster, and he's all fingers and toes at this point. Are pointing towards the government. Dami from Ikeja says, so the plan of the Minister of Agriculture for food security is by the grace of God. What did we do to deserve this? Whilst Tonya from Magodo says, if the Minister for Agriculture cannot clearly state what the average monthly consumption is for basic grains and food commodities and what is actually available in storage or silos or reserve, and we can see to what point the nation is covered, then we have no reason to believe him. Too many officials just give surface reassurances without the hard facts to back them up. And Fabian from Ekpe says, well said, Mr. C. One wonders why the minister didn't fully consider or give steps that the government has put in place to help the farmers who have suffered these huge losses or to prepare for the rush for food that will occur in December. And Ozzy says, rice is over 50,000 naira. It's heading to 56,000 naira. I just bought some and it's shocking. All right. Thank you for the updates. Um, Last I heard, I thought it was still around hovering around fifty
No,
thousand.
no, I bought rice myself yesterday. That's how I know.
And hmm, we'll move on with the messages. From the Guardian newspaper now, airlines count losses and relocate operations as union shuts down MMA2. So domestic flight operations were disrupted yesterday as aviation union members made good their threat to picket the Murtala Mohammed Airport Terminal 2, which is operated by Courtney Aviation Services Limited, and they were protesting, and they had given a notice that they were going to protest, and pickets because of the sacking of some of their members. The union had described the mass sack of its members as victimization of comrades demanding the implementation of the conditions of services. But with their protest, hordes of passengers were stranded, losses in the millions occurred, and many, many, many airlines were affected. Mr. C, what is your take on all of this?
Okay, thank you, Chopin. So let's start from the very beginning. By Courtney Aviation Services Limited terminated the employment of 34 individuals. Now, the official position from BASL is that their appointments were terminated due to declining or low productivity. Now, the union says no nonsense that they're not going to accept that and they must be reinstated.
Mm.
Now, it must bear stating that under the law, right, you cannot force an employee upon an unwilling employer. What is required is that if you decide that you no longer require the services of any individual or group of individuals, you fully comply with the terms of disengagement. So, in the absence of a notice period, you pay whatever compensation has been agreed as between the parties. That is clear. Now, the union says no, you must reinstate them. Now, this is the problem with Nigeria. There is a lot of impunity. People are lawless, people are ungovernable. Now, this action, which is a private matter, has now caused distress to passengers. I will not be surprised to hear some people miss their flights.
Oh, they did. And by the way, Mr. C, now my question is who's going to pay the airlines and the passengers? Because I want to take this quote from a chief operating officer of one of the airlines. Over 12 flights were disrupted. Yes, when this happened. Now, the CEO, and I quote, said this. This is very bad for business. We are airlines that are struggling and literally scraping the bottom of the barrel in the face of an extreme operating environment. Now, the unions and our workers are doing this to us in protest of a battle that has nothing to do with the operators. By the time they're done with the battle, I hope there will still be airlines to pay their salaries at the end of next month.
So, for me, there's a dispute between the union and the BASL. You have the National Industrial Court. Why not go there to ventilate whatever grievances you have? So, to answer your question directly, who will pay? If I was if I was the CEO of any of the affected airlines, I will sue the union leaders. I'll take them to court, and they will pay the damages because there must be an end to the nonsense that goes on in this country. When you set this example, and people actually face the full repercussions of it as stipulated by the law.
Mm.
Next time a private company sacks union members, they will follow the proper procedure. And it's not limited to the aviation industry. In the oil and gas industry, a company privately sacks some people, then Nupeng or Pengasm go on strike.
Mm.
By the time you start taking the executives to court, because they're the ones who issue the instructions, who issue the directives, and they're made to pay from their personal pockets, the damages is awarded by the courts. We will then know and fully accept that there's a proper procedure and we will follow it. The reason why this continues to work is that it's been done in the past and nothing happened.
All right. Let's take a look at this article now coming in from the Daily Post. 2023, 18 migrants arrested with PVCs in Oyo. So the Oyo State Command of the Nigerian Immigration Service saying that it had arrested a total of 18 migrants with possession of their permanent voters cards who had been scheming to participate in the 2023 elections in the state.
Okay, so this story is not exactly detailed. So the NIS in Oyo State say they arrested 18 migrants with PVCs. They then go on to say that we're not told how many PVCs were found with them. Were they found with 18 PVCs? Were they found with hundreds of PVCs? Were they found with thousands of PVCs? The number is not stated. They then go on to say that they immediately deported them. I'm sorry, what does that mean? Why were they not charged to court?
Mm.
Is that not a criminal offense? So having refused to charge them to court, what is why are you telling us they were deported? Is that the proper procedure to follow? If you if you are a migrant in a serious country and you break any of their laws, the punishment is not immediate deportation. The punishment is you have your day in court according to their laws. If you're found guilty, you will first serve out the punishment as given by the court before you're deported. But here we do things in a very wonderful and absurd manner. And I would like to see the officers who took this decision to deport them actually face disciplinary procedures, because I'm pretty certain that what they did is not in line with the laid down stipulated procedures.
Mm. All right, let's look at this one. This next article comes in from this day newspaper. Lawmakers summon finance minister, accountant general, and others allege Buhari's appointees frustrating the anti-corruption war. So this is the House of Representatives Committee on Public Accounts, which yesterday issued a 7-day ultimatum to the Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, the acting accountant general of the Federation, Silva Okoliobo, and Director General of the Budget Office of the Federation, Ben Akaboize, and the head of the Federation, Folashade Yemiason, to appear before it and explain why the budget of the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation should be so meager that, they're saying that it cannot continue.
Okay, thank you, Shopper. So before we go into the analysis, let's I would like to present the facts. Now, the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation presented a proposed budget of 11.151 billion naira for 2023. Now, of that sum, personnel costs were put at about 3.041 billion naira. They proposed the sum of 5.59 billion naira for overhead costs and 2.52 for capital expenditure. That was a proposal. Now, when it was slashed, they reduced personnel costs to 2.349 billion. They reduced overhead costs to
2.113.
2.113 billion and capital expenditure to 62.70 billion.
Mr. C, they slashed the budget by more than half. And so
So
the
now, having stated that, yes, we're in the middle of a serious recession. The country is in a very dire financial situation. But this is inexcusable, and I support the House of Reps on this. This is the Office of the Auditor General that is constantly exposing the shady behavior of ministries, departments, and agencies. It's through reports of the Office of the Auditor General that we found out, for example, that the Ministry of Justice for 4 years between 2017 and 2021, each year had sums of money that it did not account for. They received monies, and but in their records did not reflect the full amounts received. In other ministries, we found out that there were no supporting documents. It was an investigation by the Office of the Auditor General that
mm,
led to that ridiculous report where they said termites might have eaten the records. And as we speak, no one has been held to account, no one has been sanctioned, no one's been disciplined.
considering the fact that one of our president's tenets of coming in was anti-corruption, that was a very big stance. I'm gonna take this quote now. Um, okay, this quote says that we're saying we're determined to wage war against corruption. We cannot see how we intend to achieve the objectives based on which budget is formulated. They go on to say there is no other way to tell Mr. President that his lieutenants are working against him. Or are they telling Nigerians that even the objectives laid by Mr. President is determined to undermine the supreme audit institution?
So the question I have, where's the war of corruption? Where is it? Think about it.
Okay.
Now, which individual has this government started prosecution against and secured a conviction? The two ex-governors for whom convictions were secured, their prosecution started under the old administration. And then guess what? This administration pardoned them on the grounds of old age and ill health, whatever that means. And guess what?
Well,
One
I
of the
feel like it's something that the president would know, seeing as he's constantly having to go for medical checkups, maybe due to old age.
now one of them is now running for Senate. One of the people pardoned. So the biggest thing is they don't want any further exposures before they leave. 62.70 million naira is clearly insufficient to carry out its statutory responsibilities all over the nation. Last count, we had over 400 agencies of the federal government. If you have to travel to each of these places, visit their zonal offices, and properly audit their books, that is some huge expense. While we continue to pay lip service to public mantras, is what I've never been able to wrap my head around. So that's why they summon these individuals. Please appear before us and explain what is going on. Because with some other agencies, their budgets were not slashed this way. And if we're going to build strong public institutions, you cannot be slashing by more than half the budget of the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation. He is the chief ombudsman of the Federation, and he's the one that will expose every shady transaction and activity going on in government circles.
You're right. Actions speak louder than words, basically. Tayo up on WhatsApp says only in Nigeria is where trade unionism is abused without consequences because a company said no. What happened to the industrial courts? This one in Dami from Ikeja is saying it's wild that Nigerians only think about their personal comforts and not about struggling workers who create wealth for employers and are still denied their benefits. But hey, we can all look away when it's your turn at the short end of the stick. Tanya from Magodo says, let's start from first principles. The entire report on the oil migrants with the PVCs is probably one of the worst examples of journalism in history. There are too many bits of information missing, and they can do a better job than this, is what Tonya says. And Tajuddin from Ali Moshe says, yeah, no, Tajidin, I cannot answer that question. That's for you to answer. And we move on now from the nation. Let's try and get this story in from the nation. Nigeria needs $800 billion over 10 years to fix infrastructure deficits. So, speaking at the national workshop organized by the Association of Business Editors in Nigeria yesterday, I heard from Lagos State among them, there was the Lagos State Commissioner for Economic Planning and Budgeting. We heard from the Managing Director and CEO of the Bank of Industry, Dr. Wahid Olagunju, who said that there can't be any meaningful development without investment in infrastructure. And we're looking at what, $80 billion over every year over the next 10 years.
You're in trouble.
Okay.
No, some people were in trouble. So this is $80 billion each year for the next 10 years. And what that means is of the 80 billion, not 1 cent should be stolen.
Right. Mm.
Now, clearly they need the support of the private sector. They need foreign portfolio investors to come in. Now, here lies the challenge. We're in the midst of a serious dollar scarcity. And it is so bad that the federal government, which had already indicated it would clear the sum of 1.7 billion in outstanding forex related transactions concerning FPIs, did not honor that promise. It's still pending. Now, you want foreign portfolio investors to come in. Obviously, they are the ones going to carry the bulk of this requirement. And the environment is not favorable. You have a regulatory system that is topsy turvy at best. You have a judicial system that takes forever to get decisions you can rely on. So, and then you have this disparity between the official rate and the black market rate. All of this is going on, and we haven't fixed any of these things. Now we need 80 billion every year. We haven't even spoken to the fact that our politicians consistently have shown they're not responsible. They're not honest. They're not sincere. and they're only there for their personal interests first. For them, it's self first before the nation. So the truth of the matter is, if we're going to get this done and we'll also accommodate their desires to steal, we're probably looking at double or triple that sum. Now, if you're a foreign portfolio investor, would you want to invest money in a country where nobody goes to jail for criminal activities?
Wow. And we end the show on that question. Take some time to think about it, and then go find Mr. C and Monsieur C up on Twitter to respond. We're done for with Freshly Pressed for today. Thank you so much, Mr. C, for joining me for
You're
the
welcome.
analysis. And coming up, I've got entertainment for you inside the grapevine. That is at 8:15. So make sure you keep it tuned.
The headlines, the
We
stories,
go to time check.
the news,
Where did that
in-depth
start?
analysis of
I
national
don't know why
current
they do
affairs.
it.